Duggars on TV. You know who the Duggars are? That's kind of what people used to. My kids are 25 and 28, so the moms when I started homeschooling, they wore these long denim jumpers and white tennis shoes, and they all drove these really long minivans and had like 8 kids. Um, and that was the perception of homeschooling. And the boys always wore like Wranglers up to here. Did you ever notice
Way
that?
high, way high, and way short.
Yeah, you'd see kids at school at the Publix and things during the day, and you'd be like, "Why aren't you in school?" And you knew they were homeschooled. But now it's just families of all shapes and sizes. We're a Christian organization, but we welcome everyone. We have secular families, Jewish families, Muslim families, and we have single parents. We have full-time working parents. It's just it's changed a lot over the years. So you're welcome here. There's so many new people, so don't feel like you're walking into a closed group that you're going to be the oddball, because pretty much everyone in here is new. So I'm thrilled to introduce you to Jen. She's full of wisdom and experience and humor, and she will encourage you just on this journey that you're going to start. After Jen, we're going to have Kendra come in, and she will do how you get started, how you stay compliant, what's required of you, testing, all the not fun stuff of homeschooling, but stuff you need to know. And then if you have a special needs child, Shelly will be coming in after that. So restrooms here in the back of the other room. Just feel free to come and go as you need and help yourself. Jen.
Is this some spy stuff right here?
So we're recording this so that people can look at it later on.
Fantastic. This is going to be such a distraction for me. All right. I have been asked to take 40 pounds of information potatoes and load them in a 1-hour bag. So, couple disclaimers. I'm going to give you enough information to be dangerous. That's it. It's 30,000 feet. It's not a lot. Well, it is a lot. You're going to feel like you're drinking from a hose, but it's not everything. It's just to point you in the right direction. Second disclaimer. Some of you are going to be frustrated on the front end of my hour, depending on your personality and some of the things that we're going to talk about. I'm going to use a lot of stories because stories are the things that you're going to remember what I'm trying to say to you when you're in the thick of it. Some of you might rightly say to one another, boy, she sure is talking a lot about herself. It's true. I own the copyright to all my stories, and so I don't have to worry about this town and all that business by sharing some stuff. So that's very true. Thirdly, I was a late mom. I didn't have my first kid till I was 30, so I had a 10-year career prior to that. Some people say, like nodding, yes, me too. And my career was pretty interesting in that I got into a typical job, but by a couple years in, they created a job out of thin air for me that didn't exist prior based on some of the things that I'm going to talk about today. Part of what drives me, part of what interests me, part of the things that I did. And so we're going to talk about personality styles. One other disclaimer, I'm probably going to have a lot. One other disclaimer is that one of the new things that's kind of in the ethos right now is, I just drew a blank on what it is, Enneagram. Enneagram came about through a process of divination called automatic writing. You can Google it. Not me, not a fan of Enneagram, but what we are going to talk about today a lot has to do with just observational types of things, and you should nod your head quite a bit. So in order for me to cut down some of my potatoes, if you will just raise your hand to the things that apply to you, that will help me to tailor my information. If you are homeschooling for the first time ever, little cute little precious children full of hope. Okay, most of you. How many of you are going to be schooling elementary children that have had some level of outside the house instruction, public school, whatever? Same question for middle school, same question for high school. Okay, how many of you will start your homeschooling journey with more than one child? Okay. How many of these children are just alike? Okay. That's what we're going to talk about. Also you. So what I need you to do is take some piece of paper that's completely white, even if it's the back of something, and if you will make 4 equal quadrants, draw a line up and down, side to side, make 4 equal quadrants. Then take each one of those and add another horizontal line so that you have a total of 8 rectangles of similar size. All right, in the top left one, if you'll put introversion and the one on the right, extroversion. Lots of misinformation about introversion and extroversion. I hope to clear up some of it. There's always been a big question in psychology that's not been settled, and it is the question of nature and nurture. If you've been a mom for any length of time, you know that there's some programming in your kid that you had nothing to do with. You may not even like it. It may challenge you. It may remind you of people in your family. You're just like your grandfather, right? The most recent earthquake in Turkey had me Googling. I have a biological father that I've not heard from since the age of 8. When I Googled him, I didn't actually Google him. My oldest Googled him because my oldest has these weird eyes and he couldn't figure out where they came from, so he Googled the one missing piece genetically in our family and he found his eyeballs. And they were attached to a man who ironically has had 4 or 5 at least spouses, more children. I represent his firstborn, but he's a professor of family and child psychology. So that was enough. You haven't seen him since you're 8. That's all I need to know. But the recent earthquake in Turkey, he teaches in Turkey. I just Googled to see if the university collapsed or something like that. And I found information that I had not found about him before through the university, that he not only has degrees in psychology, but also in philosophy and also coaching personalities, which, by the way, that's all of what I do. So there's something about the genetics that has absolutely nothing to do, and if we were to get together someday, we would have lots to talk about. Now, the nurture piece, I did have a career in it for 10 years, but after that I had 600 plus hours with a PhD level psychologist that's not only an expert in these things, but he works for Fortune 500 companies like Publix, coaching and training and hiring for the C-suite, and so that would be my sales pitch to you on why I'm an authority to talk about the things that I'm talking about. So introversion, extroversion. What I would like you to do as we go through this, and again, 30,000 feet, not super deep, not other things like Holland clusters or Cartman triangle or any other kinds of Gregoric models and stuff, personality, just the basics. I would like you to identify what you think your tendencies are and what your each of your children's tendencies are. This is not for a box, this is just for trying to understand some stuff, right? And picture as like a slider. Midway in between super E or super I, but somewhere in the middle, and maybe try to plot it, right? So introverts tend to be introverted. So what does that mean? They tend to have this very dynamic, private thought life that they may or may not enjoy sharing out loud, but if they do get to the point of sharing, it's usually only after a period of reflection, right? When they do share, they don't find that it's particularly interesting or preferable to share with lots of people that they don't know very well. They tend to filter people. There are people for whom they don't find a lot of interest. They don't find that it's worth their time. They don't care that they exist. They just don't care. But when they do invest, they want to invest deeply and with just a few people who are trustworthy. Yeah. When you get exhausted, the way that an introvert will refuel is being alone or quiet, reading a book, maybe just even tinkering around the house, having to do with different learning modalities or whatever. They might like to just get away and change the oil or mow the grass or something like that. Extroverts, on the other hand, are opposite. Being alone with themselves too much makes them nuts. They refuel by being in public places where there is the whole 120 box crayon color of people, right? Where introverts prefer just shades of blue, maybe a purple. But extroverts love all the crayons and the bright orange. We really love the bright orange, where introverts sometimes have an allergy to the bright orange, and I'm trying to dial back my orange because I see so many eyes in here shaking their head. I don't want to get in your way. It's gonna squeak out. It's just gonna squeak. Line line walker. Even a line walker will have a preferred. I have no idea how this happened with genetics. My husband is opposite of me on every dimension, which makes us a power couple who fight a lot. But all three of the children that came from my body are introverts. One is so introverted that I had to have his blood tested. Please check it, just make sure. But he looks just like us, so I know. But boy, that's been a trip. But if you were to meet my older two, you'd go, oh, they're E's, they're total E's, and they're not. They're EIs that have been nurtured, right? And they can bring those skills. But even still, especially after they've been out in the E world faking it, they come home and leave them alone for a couple of days. Does that help you know you a little better? And you have permission. Now, think about your children and all the wonderful opportunities that are available for homeschooling, and you sign them all up for all of them. And then you tell them that, why aren't you participating in science? Your teacher asked you to do this.
Because looking out the window is more fun.
Or we ask them on tests, so this goes to the testing thing, we ask them to read this section of dialogue from a book, and we ask them to speculate on what the character was feeling. I don't know, they didn't say, right? And that goes with the next dimension too. So there is a function of your teaching that goes to test taking. I'll leave that story. But your introverts might get stifled if all we're doing is school is at 8, sit down in the chair, there's nobody to collaborate with, there's nobody to bounce their ideas off of. You see what I'm saying? So maybe a balance. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm trying to tell you, if you're fighting with your kid, you might want to take a look at this piece. How are we doing? Okay, I'm gonna keep building. Next one is an S for sensing. It's really stupid. Just write it, that's what it stands for. I didn't make it up. And over here, because the I was already taken, we use the N to represent intuition. This is another one that's gonna get you sideways with your choices in your curriculum. No, I'd take water if this was being pumped in my arm, and I'd free my mouth. So sensing, this has to do with your 5 senses. What color was it? What time was it? Did it run around? Where do I organize? These kids might tend to like to file their homework and have their notebook just neat and with the little tabs and so forth. And they like to kind of live in the moment. What's going on right now? How does it relate to me right now? Your intuitives are completely different. They only want to orient themselves to the piece of information that you just gave them in ways that, how does it connect with the larger picture? How they're about pattern recognition. They're about anticipating some future use for this thing. So again, back to test questions, back to styles of learning. Are they here in the now? This kid is going to wear you out with why? What about? And if you are not that personality type, you're going to think they're challenging your homeschool. If you're on a schedule, they are going to be the source of why you are getting off schedule. And don't you understand? And blah, blah, blah. And then they're going to be sitting there thinking, well, don't you think?
Yeah.
Right? Then you start judging one another. I'm going to do more with this. Keep going. This top thing is how you kind of orient and move through your world. This next thing is how you take in information. And if you want a little story with this one, the S is like the beat cop that shows up to the murder scene. He's like, well, okay, what did you see? And they're taking the measurements and it's 4 inches, and all this. The intuitive is the detective that comes on the scene. He makes sure that somebody's doing all the measurements, but he's the one talking to the witnesses. He's the one reading the body language. That story doesn't make sense. And he's the one thinking she looks a little shifty and all this business, right? And then they put it together with the information. If the news media shows up to the murder scene and talks to the S cop that's taking the measurement, they're going to say, what do you think happened here? I don't have an opinion yet. We got to see how the information shakes out. Don't know. The detective is not going to tell the media person, but he has a theory. He is already formulating some kind of pattern recognition idea of what happened, and he will hold that and then look at the data from the beat cop and go, okay, does it affirm my theory or disprove my theory? Now put these kids in a science class. They're going to experience that science class very differently. Does that make sense? Now make them introverts and extroverts, and the teacher just asked a question. If you've got an introverted intuitive, I can't possibly answer you right now because I haven't had time to go sit and think about the information, but you're requiring me to participate in class right now. How much better to feed, if I'm the teacher, feed the information beforehand, do your homework, come up to class prepared to discuss your ideas. Now he might be able to explore his extroversion, fakery, in class a little bit better because he feels prepared. Make sense? But only for a little while, and then Mom, don't make me do 3 classes in a row, let me go home and leave me alone and don't talk to me about my chores. Okay, next one down on this side, T for thinking, and on this side, F for feeling. This is once you have taken in the information in your preferred methodology above, how do you process that information? This is not to say that feelers don't think and thinkers don't feel, has nothing to do with that. It has to do with what is your first inclination. This is the one personality dimension that does have a gender bias. 75% of males-ish, or 80, some say 75 to 80, are males that are T, and a very small percentage of males tend to orient themselves feeling, right? And then the reverse is true for women. Women tend to be feelers, which is why we have the stereotypes. Why? Because they're true. Most of the time. So, dear glory. This is where the dial comes up. You may have a thinker who's just pegged, they hate their emotions. I've got one that's so pegged to the left. I ask him, how does that make you feel? And he looks at me like, what are you talking about? I don't feel anything. He feels 3 things. But it's honestly true, and I've had to over time go, well, that's probably right. But I do try to, because he's gonna have a wife someday, try to get him a little bit in touch, but he doesn't need to be all the way over. My daughter, on the other hand, took all of his F. Like there was nothing left for him. So she was dialed all the way up into, say, drama with, we'll get to another story, but anyway, F. The object then is to allow these kids the opportunity, especially these young, not always, I'm just going to talk in generalities, these young gals to off-gas their F-ness, is what we call it in the house, and get to their T. Darling, this information is going to be terribly upsetting for you, but I don't want to watch your deal. When I tell it to you, I want you to go to your room and I want you to do whatever you have to do to process that. Then I want you to write out your points that you want to talk to me about and come back. You know, we'll get there. Keep going. The next thing is once you orient yourself to the information, how do you file it? So on this side, put a J standing, and again, stupid, standing for judging. And on this side, a P standing for perceiving, which has nothing to do with nothing. Sports fans in here? Yeah, some? All right, Ryan Leaf, heard of him? Ryan Leaf, you have?
I think, was it a quarterback?
He was a quarterback. I've talked about Ryan Leaf for several years. No, but you're the first one. Congratulations.
I think I saw a documentary.
Well, maybe it's this. Peyton Manning, heard of him? There's a reason why you've heard of one and not the other. If you look at their college records, their statistics are very similar on paper. But in the 80s, one of just some guy who got into it, I think he was an accountant or something like that, Niedermeister or something like that. He just started pattern recognition the same way that I did in banking, and you find that certain people are good at certain things. If you look at them, In football, the I and the E, it doesn't really matter much, except for how it relates to how they lead the team. Either they're, come on guys, let's go, or yay guys. That really doesn't have a lot to do with it. Your S and your N do have some degree to do with it, how you take in information. Any basketball fans in here? Right? Like, I'm trying. My youngest, I had to learn a whole new sport. He's into basketball. And interesting, when I Googled it, most basketball, the elite basketball players are S's. Right? It makes perfect sense. I didn't know this until I start, like, if my kid's gonna be in it, I gotta learn to score it, I gotta learn all this stuff, and I'm no expert in basketball, but I will tell you that I have observed it is a much more analytical game than I ever knew. It has to do with averages and statistics and angles and muscle memory due to gross repetition and all of that kind of stuff. It's just very mathy and analytical and ugh. But it is. So S's excel in that. That you can watch them go up, pull up. I got some of the language down, and it's just them in that moment, and none of the other information matters. So S's are very good at blocking out the other information. Me, I would be out there getting hijacked in my periphery with this guy's body language and what this guy did, and I'd get all kinds of locked up in my shot, So that's actually beneficial for them. I imagine the same thing might be true of a surgeon or something like that. These things kind of go with that. What was my point? Peyton Manning. That last dimension with the P and the J where they decide. So both of them, they can know their plays written on their arm. They can get down underneath there. Peyton was slightly better. If the defense shifted and he had to call an audible, he could read it, where somebody like Leaf would probably call a timeout. I need a moment to think about what's going on, right? I need a second, not as quick thinking on his feet. But it really was the JP that hamstrung them. Once Ryan Leaf with the J committed to a course of action, that was the course of action until he had new information, then he needed a minute to step out and process it. Peyton Manning, though, being a P, can just change gears on a dime. And that made the difference to why somebody might know Peyton Manning and not Ryan Leaf in terms of a professional football context. J's, if you want to think about it, they take their information and they put it in an Excel spreadsheet in their brain. P's put it on Post-it notes and they move it around. And they lose some. They may make new ones. You see what I'm saying? Now, let's put all this together. My middle daughter, high drama, back in the day, little. She, at the time, was so J as well, and so strong-willed, that part is genetically a match. That she began presenting herself in my kitchen as though she were going to take over. Telling me all the things that I was doing incorrectly, managing my household, managing our homeschool, and it came with all the hair on fire of a little 7-year-old with drama. If I had also similarly been mentally 7-year-olds in drama, we would have gone at it, and it would have looked something like, well, I'm the mom, and because I said so, that why, and someday you may have your own house and then you start doing all this business and all this. All this told me, though, and this will be my first big tip of the day, when you engage in homeschooling, I promise we're going to get to curriculum in a minute. While you were doing your homeschool, one of the most beneficial things that I ever did was intentionally set aside a time. For me, during seasons, it was as much as weekly. Thursday night, after the kids went to bed, I went to Panera. And I sat down and I had a page, and I had made a sheet for myself, reminding me, of questions to ask myself. What's going on with each of my kids? so that I could say, okay, what are they going through? How does this relate to who they are? What is good about that? What needs to be refined about that? What needs to be redirected about it? That way, when they woke up on Friday morning, they had a mom with a plan that was ready for them. It was almost, for me, being strong-willed. All right, bring it to me, because I got a plan. If I had not done that, then instead of responding to those issues, I would be reacting to those issues. Them constantly getting in the way of my plan and not doing it right and all of these kinds of things. And so fighting. Does that make sense? Later on, I didn't have to do it quite as frequently, but that was probably one of the best things that I ever did. So here's just one example. She shows up in the kitchen telling me how I'm doing it wrong. One thing, I was a leadership team developer coordinator over here. I point to there because that was one of the branches. I love leadership. Strong-willed children are my favorite. You just have to use it. One of the things we do is tell it it's bad because it gets in our way and it threatens us. Get secure with yourself. Go figure that out before you parent your kids. So what this said to me is this child needs more control than she's currently exercising. I can leverage that and let her know that that's good, and listen, I am one personal assistant shy of being an absolutely fabulous person. Right? If I had somebody following around, recording what it is I said I would do, or scheduling the appointments I said, I would be out of this world. But I say stuff and then I forget it. She is the person that I would hire to be that person for me. But she had school. So I thought, okay, how can I leverage this for both of us? So I put her in charge of my kitchen. So I could be at an event like this, run off in town and call her, listen, I want to make this, do we have this, this, and this? And she would know off the top of her head, well, we've got this much ketchup left and we got this much this. That made her feel valuable. It made her feel like, stuff was going on. She would also then police, we need that last bit of ketchup for this thing that mom is making. Don't touch the ketchup. And so she got to exercise her little stuff and be the boss of people and all that stuff. And then that gave us the opportunity to kind of coach how you communicate. You can't just tell your older brother he can't eat the ketchup. So these kinds of things, but we got sideways. She said it would be really great, Mom, if I knew what our meals were for this week. And I don't know if you know, Publix actually has this e-meals deal where you can get online. They have selected meals and provide you the recipes based on their sales circular for that week. So you can get wicked deals and menu items to prepare, and I think it's wonderful, and I will never do it because it is too bossy. I don't know that I want Publix telling me to eat tacos on Tuesday, and I have just this inner rebellion just on principle that doesn't like that, but some of you may love that. She would love that. Oh my gosh. Lord. So what I did was I compromised, which is the best thing that I think we can do at all. I don't need her to come all the way to my side, and I don't need to go all the way to hers, especially in my own home. Take that. So what we did was I said, okay, we'll pick the items that we're gonna have each day, this week. But can we please put them on a Post-it note so that I can move them around, because I don't know what I'm gonna feel like making or where I'm gonna be on Wednesday. And so that was a good compromise for her. As long as she knew okay, we're gonna have tacos, and then I looped her in, I still had veto power. But I'm just saying, listen, Stella, how do you feel about us doing this? And there we go, and that worked for her. So we taught her compromise. She doesn't need to get her J on everybody and get all twisted because the plan didn't work out and you're a loser, Mom. No, you never do what you say. We did the same thing with her school. I am a free-flowing person. I'm a teacher by nature. I enjoy the tangents. To me, the tangents is when the best stuff happens. So you could be reading So I'm reading out loud, which is a great thing to do with your kids. My youngest is 16, the only one left schooling right now. And for another class, he has to read Treasure Island. I'm like, let's read it together because it's theatrical and all this stuff. And I hit chapter 5, and I don't know if you've read it lately, but there's this line that says, and we went a groping down the dingle. And it cracks me up every time. What is groping down a dingle? It is apparently riding your horse down a little, like a decline thing. Well, now, that spins me off on all kinds of, that Yellowstone we're watching and horses, and I know this gal with horses, and what, we can go over there and she can show you after you shift your weight, and that's a science thing, so we can study some science stuff. To me, that's where the best learning happens. And I've got Stella over there going, but we're in the middle of grammar.
Yeah.
You look completely irrational, and if we go off to these horses, I am not going to finish before noon, and I had planned to make the grilled cheese, and it's on the thing. Do you see what I'm saying? I was not an early riser. She was an early riser. One of the best things that I did for this kid to accommodate her is there are just certain subjects, and by the way, if you've got multiple kids, if you think that you are going to do your homeschool the way they do in public school, where your kids have a full gamut of 7 subjects in a day and all at that grade level, and you're going to do that perfectly for this one and this one and this one, you're not, and I'm going to tell you you're not. And if you try it, I'm going to recognize you in the store. You're going to look like you're strung out on, crack or something. Gonna bend over and the elastic's gonna be shot in your pajama pants as you reach down there. Don't do it. As many subjects as you can combine, you can do at multiple levels. A lot of the homeschooling curriculum is written that way. But math has to be kind of on grade level a lot of the time. You can't just kind of freeform that. So there are certain subjects that she can get up. And listen, there's some workbook junk. Some people love workbook junk. I don't. She did. So I made an Excel spreadsheet, copied it off, took it over to Staples, had them bind it. Each night before I would go to bed, most of the time she would remind me, and I would write in what she needed to take care of the next morning. Do you know how happy I made this child? I don't understand it, but I'll describe it to you. Maybe you'll understand it. She would get up and she would go to her little box where everything is filed just so, and she would take out her little thing and she would see, oh, I've got to do this, and she'd go empty the dishwasher because it was a chore chart. She's humming and happy, and I get up, drag it in, push play on the coffee, and she's like got little checks, and she's got a stamp, and she's stamping flowers instead of check marks, and she's got all of her stuff done. She's happy. I'm tickled to death. And now I'm not in her way. Stella, what time do you need to be back from the grilled cheese? Great, I've got 2 hours. Let's go explore horses groping down the dingle. You with me? So she's precious. With her F-ness, and see, what I'm trying to do is you're going to be spending a lot more time with your children perhaps than you ever have. It's a lot. I'm 36 and I look like this. I will tell you that my oldest boy, just to give you more stuff, my oldest boy is 23. He got paid to go to college because of the score that he made on some of these tests, because he took the right one because it worked for him. He went to the Zimmerman School of Advertising. He could have gone to any school in the state of Florida, chose Zimmerman School of Advertising over here at USF, has an advertising and political science degree, none of which is he using in his field right now. But he's gainfully employed. Darling little girlfriend. And make me some grandbabies. Especially because she's Venezuelan. She's so cute. Little tiny thing. My daughter, let me tell you this. She's one of the ones where she hated the test. I don't know what they're thinking. My oldest is kind of creative. He's artsy. He's weird. He would have been weird if he went to public school. He's just weird. He did do some typical extroverted stuff. He was the commissioner of, Chief Financial Officer for the state of Florida in the Youth and Government Program. Speaking in front of as many as 700 kids and adults. You would swear he's an extrovert. He's not. He's very, advertising, he's artistic. He was a 2-time regional swim competitor for the Heat. Great swim program, by the way. We have a good coach. He was just like me, and I was successful with him in everything that we touched. He's so compliant and so darling, and I'm worried about him the most because he's compliant and darling. Right? Stella, she's younger. She's 4 years younger. She's 19. She is much different from me. So let me interject into the thing that I gave you before with the personalities. Another thing is 3 learning modalities. The first one is visual. I'm leaning heavily on a visual learner today. I'm telling you visual stories so that you can construct things in your head. This would have to do with seeing something, a diagram. It would have to do with if you're taking notes right now and you're using symbols or you're changing colors, or when you do recall, you picture something in the chalkboard of your mind. That would be a visual learner. That was my oldest boy. In God's providence, I got one of each, so that nothing that I learned with the first one could I use with the other ones. The second child, my strong-willed kitchen diva, she is an auditory learner. We figured this out. There are some learning issues. She was doing slowly, spelling. Oh my gosh, one day we had to have a discussion that she's probably right. We shouldn't spell that word that way. But we cannot dig up dead bodies, because that's illegal, to argue and debate with Webster why he should not have spelled it that way. And even if we did, we'd have to get it all changed and then printed, and you'd be an old lady by that happened. So why don't you just learn to spell it this way? That was her. And most of the time she was right. So the first company, and listen, you're gonna meet people in homeschool that tell you that this is absolutely the best curriculum ever. All the successful people do it this way. No, that's why I spent time on your personality stuff. No, there is no one best thing, but one best company is Institute for Excellence in Writing. Andrew Pudawa is trained in the Suzuki method of education, how the brain works, brain mapping, why boys like to read books with lots of adjectives and adverbs, and girls like to read books with lots of adjectives, and the shelves in the library are full of girl books that tell you what people were feeling and what color it is, and then it smelled so nice and it was all cute and lovely. Boys just want to know how fast it was going when it hit the wall and how many pieces it broke into. Do you see what I'm saying? Dangerous book for boys, those kinds of things. So they think that they don't love to read when really what they don't love to read is girl books. If you put, just on my Facebook thing, it pops up this morning, my son said, Dad told me that I could not make gunpowder out of my urine and grass from the yard, but he's wrong.
There really is a book called Dangerous
Book for Boys.
And you can build all kinds of catapults.
During the Civil War,
All kinds
when
of
they were
fun
short
stuff.
on saltpeter, they would combine urine. I don't know how it works. All I did was look at this kid who is, we haven't gotten to Sam, but he's the strongest willed child on planet Earth ever of all time. I said, so what you're telling me is there's a bottle of urine and grass in my house somewhere. He goes, well, not anymore. I have found water bottles of urine under the boys' bathroom sink. But that's what they love to read about. My boys love to read. You know what my boys learned to read on? Calvin and Hobbes, Foxtrot, reading at a high school level because it's funny, you know? We also tutored, I live in Plant City, we tutored some of the migrant children, and we would sneak in Calvin and Hobbes. Why? Because it got the boys to read. Don't put inappropriate stuff in front of your kids, but if they'll read it, let them read it, right? They don't have to read about feelings. What care? By the way, who cares what grade they're reading on to? They'll get there. So my daughter struggled with reading. There might have been some mild dyslexia. There are things that she didn't get right. She was slow. What I wound up doing, this was based on, IW, they have something called phonetic zoo. And what scientists have found is if you put the auditory, so if you're doing classical conversations or something like that, and they have auditory songs and songs about punctuation, I would stab myself in the eye before I would do this, but my daughter probably would have loved it. The little memory songs, and remember from our childhood, you know, I before E except after C, and all the other times it really doesn't apply. But putting the earbuds in the ear and canceling out everything else fixed her spelling in one semester. Not perfectly, but it sure changed the trajectory. So, auditory learner. From that, I learned, and I'm trying to read aloud to my children. Again, brilliant thing to do, but I'm so intuitive and I read everybody's body language that her RBF was just jamming me up and ticking me off. And so then I would react. So what I wound up doing is recording all of those materials for her that she could take into her introverted space and play them in her ears. Fixed everything. I would have said that she's not big on literature, that she's just surviving. She is fixing to finish her AA degree at HCC for free with a degree in English literature. She loves the Gothics and the Renaissance period and all of that kind of stuff. You don't know. Find solutions that work for your kid. That's not to say, I've already showed you how I stretched her in areas that were not her thing, but get her involved in that. It's a story about Sam. I know I had one.
What was that curriculum you said?
Institute for Excellence in Writing is the website. Andrew Pudawa is the guy. I'm sure you've been told already to go to convention over Memorial Day,
Well, I
Labor
told
Day.
the high schoolers, but I don't know how many people stayed.
Okay, end of May. I no longer go so that you will have a parking space. When I first started going there, like I didn't know about homeschooling, and what Teresa said was true. They told me, you know, hey, you want to homeschool your kid? And I was like, oh, what's that? And so I went to the first convention, and it was very small in comparison. Same place, very small. And I told my husband, if they're all weird, I'm not doing it. Do you know, I was the cool kid in high school. I'm not doing it. So I'm walking around and I'm like, they look pretty normal. They look pretty normal. And then you see Maria, who dressed all of her kids in the curtain clothes like the Von Trapp family. And I was like, I'm out. But I let him know I'm strong-willed. If there's a way to do it and them not be weird, I'm gonna find it, right? My oldest is still weird. Isn't that cute? But my youngest is cool. Like he's super cool without even trying. So again, it's in the genes. All right, so let's talk curriculum and kind of bring all of this together. There are two categories-ish in general. There's some weird stuff too. Weird meaning not just in the mainstream. I don't mean weird like you're weird. But two categories, two schools of thought. One is classical conversations, CC. There's plenty of groups in the area now. This would be a classical kind of education that is based on the trivium. And so what the trivium is, this has to do with Aristotle and think going up on Mars Hill and having, you know, dialogues and people and discussing things back and forth and debate, but that comes after. You have to mature to that age. So in the early age, and this is true, children have this amazing capacity for rote memorization. It's just a window that's programmed into it. It's a little harder when you get to be an old dog, not impossible. But rote memory is so easy for them. The number of words a child learns at age 2 per day is just like nothing ever, 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 okay? So classical conversations would say that they are capitalizing on this window of opportunity to pump as much grammar rules, spelling, multiplication tables, all of those kinds of things into that basically education, elementary ed period of time. Then middle school is learning how to take those bits of information and kind of reason them through. And then high school is about then taking that reasoning and learning to debate it in the marketplace of ideas. All of those things are fine and noble and good and wonderful and lovely and great, and I agree with a lot of it. My personality would have hated homeschool if I did it. My daughter, again, would have loved it. And so if you can do a parent swap or whatever, that's great. If you enjoy, I always took scope and sequence, which is kind of on grade level, what your kids should be proficient at by the end of this school year. And I took it as kind of a suggestion. We know that little girls develop their small motor skills much earlier than boys do, who develop their large motor skills. Why do they all need to have good handwriting by the end of first grade? I did not even work on handwriting with my boys until 4th, 5th grade. And then I leveraged, right? Nobody's checking on me. It's not like we're not doing it. But here's what I can imagine for my boy getting into his head, the creative one who likes to tell stories. Chase, I want you to write a story. So he gets a story in his head and it's all exciting, and then he sits down and every time he goes to write, am I supposed to capitalize that? Which way does the stick go on the lowercase a? Is there a period there? Do I have to put a question mark? And now it's no longer fun to write. So the very thing that he's gifted in doing, which is storytelling, he thinks he hates it because he's hamstrung by the punctuation and just the hand fatigue and all of this kind of stuff. So he used to tell the stories, and I would type as fast as his little, words will come out. Then we would read the story later for, Dad, it's a fabulous story. And then later on, once you practice the handwriting, then it's easy. Or typing, which you don't even have to type to do anymore. All my kids type with, these 2 fingers and a thumb, from using their phones. But my daughter, handwriting. So he was into Calvin and Hobbes. And he was doing caricatures and all these if you're gonna write comics, you have to have good handwriting. So then you give him the handwriting book and now he's motivated. You make sense? Guess what? He knows how to write at 23. Who cares when he did it? You with me? This business of teaching grammar and the 3rd grade test that they give to schools, I'm not busting on schools. Schools have to do the way they do. I'm not busting on teachers. I'm saying you don't have to do it that way, and they wouldn't do it that way if they had options and not classes full of 30 people, right? 3rd grade, they have to be proficient in certain types of punctuation and all this kind of stuff. With my oldest, because he was writer, I taught punctuation 6th, 7th grade, and then I never taught it again. Why? Because he learned it. My 16-year-old, he's just now doing it for the first time. Why? He's not a writer. He still needs to do it. He still has to be a good writer, but he's learning it one time, and then he's going to have it, and he's doing who, which clauses and doing the punctuation correctly. But IEW, again, their writing program, and there are others, but my college kid would text me from USF. He would be given a writing assignment. He could write a 5-paragraph essay on the question they gave him in 35 minutes, and he was out while people were still trying to figure out what to write about. I could not pull off the discipline of IEW writing because I've met me, but I outsourced that, and that's what I did, and that was great. All right. The other, so if you love structure and you love being told what to do and having a plan each day, if that matches your personality or your kid's personality or whatever, CC is a wonderful option. The other one is called Charlotte Mason method. You can Google it. The local kind of modern proprietor of information, if you want to Google somebody, is Karen Andriola, like Andrea with Ola on the end. You will find her. I believe she is the daughter of Francis Schaeffer, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that she is Karen Schaeffer Andriola. Don't quote me on that, but I think I'm right. Which is often the case. So Charlotte Mason was an educator in the late 1800s. And she had a very different approach to early ed. And it resonated with me. And so if I speak with it with bias, there's a reason. She wanted, and it just was my particular conviction, that if I could teach my kids to love learning and to resource themselves over time, I could work myself out of a job. Right? If I could I have an obligation to educate my children, but if I could pass ownership of their education onto themselves in a way that they appropriated the responsibility for themselves, then you just watch them go. And that's, to me, what it was about. And I felt for me that was the methodology that best suited my personality and my vision. So early years, so if you've got little kids that you're toddling around in the woods and stuff, the park days, and you go up and you notice, hey, do you see, oh, look at that bee, I wonder what he's doing, and you see him rubbing his hands, and you teach them to pay attention to little things. Do you see how the bee is doing that? Do you see what the flower is doing? Do you see, oh, what's that little thing that came out of his mouth? Then you go to the library and you find books that will tell you about a proboscis and tell you about nectar and tell you about stamen and pistil and all the parts of the flower. And then maybe you queue up a magic school bus where Mrs. whatever her name is goes, was what? Frizzle. She goes down into the flower with her school bus and they explore all the different bits, right? You're doing biology. And you're teaching them that it's fun. You see what I'm saying? And then you progress, and I will tell you that some of the top scores for all of education we used to be in America one of the tops. We are no longer, and has not been for a long time, one of the tops. Actually, Sweden is among one of the tops. The Philippines in math. Sweden would be overall, and they don't even start any formal education whatsoever until age 7. And they play in the woods and do stuff like that. The best place to teach colors and phonics is the produce department at Publix. You got all the colors. Can we find all of the produce that starts with A? Apples, asparagus. You can stand there and do all of that. You don't need workbooks. You don't need your kids. Now, they do have to spend some time because they have to develop those small motor skills. But for me, busy work does not work. I hated busy work. I don't want to do it. I'd hate school. So if you want to not have that, but my kids learn all kinds of things by choice now because of this cultivation of a love of learning. Couple of websites. CC, we've got groups all over the place. You can go online, Google local, you can get some information from Teresa and you can get with those people and you can do park days and you can find out whatever it is, and if that suits you, that's great. For Charlotte Mason, Karen Andreola is one of them. There is a book, if you still have littles, called Laying Down the Rails that I highly recommend. Laying Down the Rails, Google it. Ambleside Online something or other, just Ambleside, is a free resource that is largely a spine of information by age or grade that you can then take to the library and just grab books or whatever and put together your own education. All of our theme parks have education departments. So for example, Busch Gardens even has a TV program called Wildlife Docs. So they've got all of their veterinarians that do work with the thing. They've done a TV show. There are little passport books that your kid can do. So if you're doing letter H, you can do hippos and you can go study hippos, and then you can socialize your kids by having them talk on a Tuesday morning when nobody's in the park to the hippo person, and they will tell them all about the little hippos. They can learn math, map skills, navigating around the park, and all that kind of business. You do not need to sit and do like all this little work. You teach fractions by baking. Once they understand that, you sit them down in front of a fraction book and they're like, I got it, I already know it. And then you can teach them how to add and multiply those. But the concepts, you don't need a workbook. I feel like I'm leaving out a ton of stuff. Oh, one of the options that you have, if you want to look up all-in-one curriculum, there are things, and I'm just going to give you an example of one of them. One of them is called the Prairie Primer. It is built around the Little House on the Prairie book series. Again, there's lots of different kinds. This is just one example. If you are educating different levels of students and even different genders, so you will read a chapter of the book and it will correspond to this workbook. And in the workbook, let's say that Ma and Pa just brought in the harvest and they're going to be canning. So then maybe the book will tell you to talk about Louis Pasteur, and it will have some links about botulism and spores and fungus in general and tools and I don't know, oxen or whatever it is. But you see what I'm saying? It will have several different subjects at several different levels with different options. You can also read about this book on, you know, and then go to the library to the biography section and get a Louis Pasteur, and then you tell them what's the difference between a biography and an autobiography and fiction and nonfiction, and you teach them how to use the library. And you teach them how to appropriately, with the filters and so forth, Google stuff. Does that make sense? But that resource goes all the way to high school and it's completely free. So, but when you're doing your research, if you want, because if you go to the convention at the end of May and you walk downstairs in the expo hall, your mind is going to explode with all of the different options, and all of the carnival barkers there selling their product are going to be telling you that theirs is the best way to do it. And there's some that tell you should teach cursive handwriting first because that's natural to the hand, and flowy and, you know, manuscript is not, and you know, the guy across the street is telling them, no, this is the best way, and it's gonna really hurt your head. If you can decide on your point of view before you go, you've cut your options down to roughly half. What is the learning style that you think that your curriculum fits? Is it more kind of a classical education, or is it more a Charlotte Mason approach? Then you have whittled it all down. Does that make sense? So you can do individual subjects. Many people, Matthew C is for visual learners, lots of little, you know, learning blocks and things to make base 10. So Matthew C is a great program. I chose to use Singapore math up until about 4th or 5th grade, and then for me it got weird and I changed it up. But we have teachers in the area. I did calculus in high school. I did not want to do it again. There is a school teacher who loves that stuff. I gave my kids to her, and I'm going to tell you it's the best $350 a year that I spend. And she used to teach at Riverview High School and uses the same books. What else am I forgetting? I did math.
You're doing good. I mean, there's no way we can cover
We
everything.
can't. I just wanted to tell you, if you can sit down, figure out who you are, figure out who your kids are, you can whittle down your curriculum choices. English, surely English would be very classical, very structured, very regimented, very this, something like a Shirley English, something like a Bob Jones, Alpha Omega, a Becca. A Becca furnishes all the, not all, but many Christian schools curriculum, so you can just click on their 2nd grade and they'll send you a box with everything that you need. And if you're just doing one, fine, good for you. If you're wanting a box for each kid, it's why they added the online thing, so then you can sit your kid in front of the screen and somebody else can teach them, which is fine. I let people teach my kids too, but I'm just saying, you have to decide, you can't do it all. On the Charlotte Mason side, history is another big one. If you want to look at history from a classical approach, that would be Susan Wise Bauer. What's her stuff called? Huh? Story of the World, yes, Story of the World. And I have used her, very detailed, very analytical. She's very, you know,
Mystery of History.
Mystery of History is the other one. I can't think of her name. Mystery of History, Bokur is the middle name. Mystery of History. She is like me, and then somebody has taken dictation and written about history. And again, whatever. I don't use any of them now, and I'm currently teaching through Middle Ages Reformation history. And then I go online and I use this guy who works for Gordon Cromwell University with my high school age kids from 13 up. Why? Because they can. There's not a grade thing. They're intelligent people, and I don't tell them, oh, you're not ready for that. You can. All right, what questions do you have quickly? Science. The premier science would be Apologia. They have under J. Weil, W-Y-L-E, J. Weil. A couple of years ago, he got sideways with Apologia. He has now started his own thing. I will tell you that it is decidedly Christian apologetic based, but science is science. Yeah. So,
And they have elementary and high school.
all of it, and they have online classes, and they have all kinds of things. There's also a number of science ones here in this town. Connie Gerbasi is one of them, that teaches,
And they do science.
yes, and they have science classes here, and all that kind of stuff. And again, Jeannie Fulbright writes for Apologia. She has the elementary version, so that's a lot of animals and
There's winged things.
wings, land animals, ocean
yeah.
animals. So you can get a SeaWorld pass and do the ocean book with Jeannie and, you know, study the beluga whale and his big fat melon, and then you can go see him at the deal and all that kind of stuff. So elementary and high school, that is the premier one, but you will see others. And there are like anatomy and physiology, curriculum and so forth. What else?
About a curriculum.
Yes.
I've been eyeing Gather Around. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with it.
What has happened in the last couple of, maybe even the last 7 to 10 years, is a lot of the ones that we're familiar with, because homeschooling has exploded and we are reselling our curriculum, we have inadvertently put them out of business because they can't sell new product. So there have been others that kind of show up that I'm not familiar with, so I would recommend now the big ones, yes, are still around, but I would recommend you go to the convention, which is really the only place where you can stand there and put your hand and flip through the books, unless you know somebody who's using that curriculum that you can meet up with at a park day or whatever and look at it. But I can't. And use the Facebook page for Heat to go in there and ask, you know, we've got forums. You can ask, anybody use this? Can I take a look at it? What else?
How do you find like the teachers that you talk about to teach math or
Yeah,
the
you have to be in the community. So you can ask Teresa and some of the ladies that work here. We have resources. If you belong to the Heat Facebook page, she will post, she will send you emails on what classes are going to be offered here. There is another large group in the area called FISH, Families Instructing Students at Home, and they also offer sports and some classes. I think this buffet of classes is more rich in terms of variety and diversity here, but then there are just little private ones. The one I teach on, I do out of my own house, and so you would only know that if you are in community with people, and so you have to come out and meet people and make friends.
So I think you mentioned a parent swap. What does that look like?
Oh, I was being funny.
Oh, okay.
Mostly.
No, I mean, I think you said in the context of.
Yeah, mostly. Like, some people do not speak theology and philosophy and Reformation history like I do, so they give me their kids.
I mean, is that something that's above board? That's
Completely above board. And if I had littles, I would say, I will teach your big ones. You take my littles to the park. Sometimes, it depends on what I teach. I've also taught culinary classes, and I only do that for money. And there's a strategy in that. I don't want your opinion on how I should do it. So you pay me money, you drop your kid off to me, and if you like it, you stay. If you don't, bye. Whereas a lot of these work on volunteerism, and then people get in there and then they start having an opinion, and then 3 years later it doesn't look like what you started, and now you hate that thing. It depends. If you're doing it with your friends and you guys have a thing, it could go great for years. But I'm just telling you that over however many years I've been homeschooling, that getting paid works for me.
I'll give you an example of parent swap. When my kids are all grown, they're 25, 23, and 21, and I'm gonna do all the legalities in a minute. But I had a friend who loved writing, and I like grammar. I'm a good writer myself, but it was really hard for me to teach writing. That wasn't easy for me, and my kids and I butted heads. They did not like to see all those red marks on their paper, and I didn't like the conflict. I'm not a conflict person. So she taught my oldest to write, he is now a wonderful writer, did very well in college. I love dissections. I will do that. I'm not afraid of, the smell doesn't bother me. I'm so intrigued by all of it. So we taught a science class, and we taught biology together, and she did all of the the teaching of the systems of the body, and I did all the dissections. So that's the kind of thing we did. Heat didn't exist at the time, and so we
So I had urine under the sink and she had a fetal pig in her freezer.
Yeah. We did.
What else?
So I'm more clear about how to teach my daughter whatever, but I'm a little confused about how to document that, the portfolio thing.
Yeah, that's her.
Oh,
She's
that's me.
next.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Alright, so I'm a little over. We good?
I did have one question.
Go ahead.
Back to the personality thing and different types of learners. One thing that you didn't bring up was kinesthetic learners.
Yes. Oh, that was what I said. I have a story about Sam.
Okay, well, I didn't want to interrupt.
Okay.
But I'm
No,
one
that's
of those,
great. Give
I'm
me a
one of
minute.
those
Give
finger
me a minute.
tapping, leg shaking kinesthetic learners myself, and I have a
This
son
child.
that has a hard time focusing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he needs to be very physical. So like,
Oh
how
my
do I
gosh.
create
First of
more
all,
discipline so he can focus.
I think that, what's the thing? ADHD,
Yes.
ADD. I think that is a real thing. But I
I'm
will
high
tell you-
functioning at best. So.
I will tell you, in France though, it's a thing, but it ain't as much a thing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of boys are put on drugs to get them to sit still like little girls in school, okay? And there are some little girls too. So 4 years difference between number 1, 3 years difference between 2 and 3, 7 years overall. This little one, I've never been audited. She's gonna talk to you about you have to keep some samples of your kid's work so that if they come in and wanna know that you're not keeping your kid in a closet, that you can document that. And I was like, what am I gonna do if they come look at this kid's work? Because he would do it, but then he would stab it with his pencil. He would take enemy fire and he would flip. And I've got pictures of him like hanging upside down in his chair in the homeschool room and stuff.
Yeah.
Literally, in order to get through subjects, I got a mini tramp and put it in the floor and just told him to go over there and jump on it, just keep jumping. So I would do the history lesson, I would read aloud from Mystery of History, and I had a love sack, you know what that is, the big giant foam bean bag, and he would be flipping and diving and all that kind of stuff. And so I would get to the review portion, so, in what year did Columbus, whatever, and he'd go, 1492, and jump. He had been listening the whole time. All of that stuff helped him to listen. I will tell you, if I brought him in here today, you would call me a liar. He is the most stoic, straight-faced person ever. But whatever it takes. And so this is why, if I'm in a class, I may have to sit him down and tell him the parts of a frog, because I can't have 30 kids cutting into frogs, but you can in homeschool. And listen, I had frogs in my freezer too, and I didn't put them there. And I've been known to have to post on Facebook. Anybody know how to get a frog out of an ice dispenser? So, and again, he's the kid with the pee under the sink and all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Let him run through the woods and shoot things, right? Shh. All right. What else?
Any more questions?
That was gonna be my question.
Same thing? Yeah, so auditory, visual, kinesthetic.
You didn't get any Charlotte Mason, literature, English.
A lot of the early stuff is just reading aloud and doing something called narration, which you can find from Karen Andreola's book and stuff. It's telling the story back in their own words, so that's pre-writing. Are they metabolizing? Are they focusing on the literary aspects? Can they tell the story back to you? And so that would be kind of a piece of it, outlining those kinds of things in the early years. So just a very gentle kind of approach, the same way as adults we learn things. Like if I want to learn right now, listen, there was a period of time where we had to all learn how to bake our own bread by grinding our wheat. Remember that?
Yes.
Um,
In order to be a homeschooler, you had to have a wheat grinder and you had to be able to make your own bread. When we started 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
Yeah, but how do you learn to do that? If you want to do food preservation, how do you learn? You just show your kids how to do that. So that would be very Charlotte Mason, very interest-led. It can overlap with one of the kind of offshoot things, which is unschooling, which is kind of interest-based. Now, again, that's great to a point, but your kids, if they intend to go to college or have a job, they have to learn how to live between the rules. They can't be walking around their corporate job barefooted, because they're grounding, unless you work for like Twitter or something, they have that. But you can't, you have to put on shoes. And so, all right, what else? Okay.
Let's give you guys a quick break. Use the bathroom if you need to. Get a fresh bottle of water. Just be quick, and then I'll start. I've got a great handout, so we can go through the slides quickly, and it will cover all of the legalities, what you're responsible for as a homeschool parent, and so that part will go fast, and then we can do more questions.
And what she doesn't say, you're free to do whatever you want to do.
I will.
We have to do this. Hope the wedding is well.
Austin's kind of nippy-tucky nice. Yeah. Everybody's excited about going out there. It'll be fun trip. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
I'm wondering if you'll raise and teach my extrovert
7-year-old. She will survive. If my introverted daughter will survive, you'll bless her. And good, I'm glad.
and actually